so happy to see you here. And I don't know if Venerable Dundra shared, this is actually going to be the last class for the course instead of 6. I'm actually traveling next week for work. And I think we've covered most of the essential stuff. There's a little bit more material I want to cover today. But last week was I felt like a fantastic discussion. The most participation that I've had so far. I'm taking it as a good sign. I found it very worthwhile. I hope everyone else did as well. So sad that this is going to be the last class of this course, but hopefully I'll be doing more courses and get to see everyone's lovely face again. And I really have appreciated the participation this go around. It's been really fantastic.
And I
So,
want to say, I appreciate that you have allowed interaction to this extent because I think the classes are much more vibrant when we do have that kind of interaction and not, sometimes they feel rather didactic instead. So thank you.
well, like I said, I'm really grateful. I think, it takes people being willing to participate. And I think sometimes, maybe it takes a couple sessions before people really feel comfortable to, join in a discussion. But I'm grateful. It makes it much more interesting for me. And then, kind of know what things maybe we need to hit on or cover a little bit more. But let's start with our usual thing, which is just quieting our minds for a little bit. And I always say arriving, maybe all of you are completely present right now, but at least for me, it takes a second, shifting into neutral and kind of bringing myself here. And so let's just take a minute or two to focus on our breath and leave behind whatever we were doing 10 minutes ago. We've joined the class. Here we are.
Activity on your
And now let's get in touch with our highest wish, our wish to help all living beings. And think just how wonderful it would be if we were able to do that. How wonderful it would be if we didn't have selfishness or anger or attachment. How great it would be not to have mental afflictions, and how available we would be for others. How much happier we would be ourselves. And so, with a mind that takes refuge, let's set our motivation that we can achieve all the realizations of the path to really truly reach our fullest potential, to be of ultimate benefit to ourselves and others. And setting our motivation that that's what we are going to use this time for, and dedicate our efforts today towards that end. And then when you're ready, we can do refuge and bodhicitta. I'll do in Tibetan. Sangye chodong soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi janyan gipe sonam ki chola penchir sangye drupa sho. Sangye chodong soki chognam la Jangchu Baju Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chenyan Gipe Sonamki Trula Penchir Sange Trupasho. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha through the virtue that I create by practicing giving other perfections and attending these teachings. May I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. Okay, so we have really covered, I think, most of the material on karma. There were a couple things that I thought today I wanted to start with just to make sure that I covered it. And then I would love to have an animated conversation like last week. I'd love to see some of that activity again. But, you know, we've talked about, how karma works, how you create a full path of karma and the different ways that it ripens, and then how you purify karma. But I thought to also bridge, because it was a while before I ever heard, and it makes total sense, like how those four opponent powers, or those four, the four R's for purifying karma, like what it is that they purify, what aspect, what kind of ripening do they purify. So the first one, refuge and bodhicitta, the reliance, it it serves to purify the rebirth. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense, right? Like refuge and bodhicitta, these are the things that will eventually block the doors of a negative rebirth for us at some point. So that they are purifying negative rebirths, like how we show up as a hell being or an animal or in a god realm. Um, and then the result resembling the cause. So this is, you are a violent person and you experience violence in your life, that kind of thing, or you're a person who steals or has that, inclination, and so you find yourself not having sufficient resources or having your resources taken away from you. So that result resembling the cause is purified by our regret. And I want to talk a little bit more about that because that's really where I want to focus our discussion tonight. So you can think of all of these four powers as like weed killer, right? So we are targeting the things that we don't want, and we can target them, as we already discussed. We can target them as, hey, I know I did this thing. I'm going to apply four powers and purify this thing that I'm totally aware of that I just did yesterday or 5 years ago. Or we can say, I'm currently experiencing something and I don't like it. And maybe I don't know exactly what caused it, but I know the flavor. I know it must have been something similar. And then working backwards to cultivate that, first of all, taking refuge. Refuge and bodhicitta, obviously you'd have to have refuge if you are thinking like, I'm going to go back and to try to figure out where this came from, and then developing the regret from there, and creating some kind of remedy or remedial action, and that can be formal Buddhist practice, or that can be something that you're doing in your daily life. Really nice if it's both that you're doing. And then the resolve, the decision to abstain from that. And I know I've shared personally that regret can be a hard thing to muster when you don't make that direct correlation, or you don't really feel like you've done something in this life. But it's a very powerful weed killer, very powerful towards destroying a negative seeds. And you think about it, result similar to the cause. That's the stuff that we're actually trying to avoid, the stuff that we don't like in terms of, how things are ripening in this life. The resolve, um, it and I think this is kind of intuitive, that purifies the habit. So that's the result that resembles the cause in our actions. So I said one of the ways that karma ripens is as this habit, and that's very insidious. And that is our resolution to abstain from that negative action for some period of time. That's going to purify that habit. It helps us to break that habit. And again, when you think about it, I feel like these are all pretty intuitive in terms of what they're purifying. And then the remedy itself helps to purify the result ripening as our environment. So, when we're going out and you think of your environment, it's all of the details that kind of populate our world, right? So we have those things that are happening kind of directly to us, and that's the experience similar to the cause. And then we've got these habits, and then we have this place where we show up and the kind of details around it. I'm living in a country that's war torn or divided. I'm living in a place where good health care is, and it's all relative, right? But is not available for everybody. So all of these different kinds of things. So thinking in terms of when I apply a remedy, I am actually making my world a better place. I'm taking an action to improve it. And so I think it makes total sense that ripens the environment, that the result in the form of an environment where we live. So I'm going to pause there, just kind of checking in, like, does that sort of make sense? I mean, maybe this is total review for everybody, but I think it's nice to just spend some mental time thinking about it. So I'll wait and see if there's any comments on just that. And then I'll move along. I don't know. I never know if I've waited long enough. I'll count to 10. I don't really want a ton of awkward silence either. And then I thought I would share some of the direct signs. So direct signs that our purification has been successful. Because I think, people sometimes, we don't know. We can't necessarily see directly. But some signs from scripture are, dreams of like vomiting, right? Kind of makes sense. Like we're purging, getting rid of something. Dreams of flying, seeing the moon or the sunrise in our dreams. Also, like overcoming criminals or wild animals. So, you might have what feels like a bad dream where, you're being attacked or something negative is happening by animals or criminals or something, but like you survive or you get past it. That's a very good sign of purification. And then things like dreaming of monks or nuns, dreaming of being in teachings, all of those can be really positive signs. Dreaming of milk, dreaming of elephants. There's a long list. But if you're looking for some indicator that you've done your purification well, these are some signs. It doesn't mean if you don't get those signs, it doesn't mean that you haven't purified. But people always want to know, like, what are the signs? So I think from my perspective, that really covers the meat of the material that I would cover in a course on karma. I think you have like a textbook good idea now, like, what are the laws of karma? How does it ripen? How do you purify it? And then some specifics about the way that it shows up depending on, what you've done in terms of the 10 non-virtues. But I thought what most of us in classes like this where we're talking about karma and we talk about purification, we're so focused on negative karma. And it's really important because we have to get rid of that. We've got there's two things that we have to do. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to have this house in Northern California, and he had like rooms that were just filled with like water bowls and things to offer. And there were little signs in there, and it's like basically the two things that we do that mean something in this life are accumulating merit, so good deeds, and purifying negativities. And if you look at Buddhist practice, you could kind of sum everything that we do put them in those two buckets. And so it's super important that we purify. We have countless lifetimes where we've done things that, again, laws of karma, they grow. So it becomes a much bigger thing. The small little thing that we do kind of snowballs into something, horrific that can ripen. So it's really important that we focus on purification. But I think sometimes we don't spend enough time on creating the merit, but maybe more importantly, uh, fertilizing the merit that we create. So we talk about dedication. That's one thing that we do. And hopefully we do well. When you do when you do an obvious Buddhist thing, right? Then we're like, okay, we're in a class. We will now dedicate. And hopefully that's always covered in any kind of Buddhist activity that we do. The dedication is built in. It's like sealing, sort of like everything we do, it'll ripen in multitude of ways, right? But we're making sure that, okay, I'll get an ice cream cone probably tonight, but I want this to ripen not just as an ice cream cone tonight. I want it to ripen as full blown enlightenment. So it's like putting it in a savings account. Like it's all going towards enlightenment, and then we can like live on the interest that we get, the fallout from that, and it's plenty. But making sure that all the good deeds we go are kind of like being safeguarded in that storehouse of goodness, storehouse of virtue. You might have heard that term before. But I think so we do that, but maybe we don't do enough rejoicing. And so we talk about regret as being this great weed killer for our negative karma. Well, conversely, rejoicing is a great fertilizer for our positive karma. And if you remember when we talked about, a full karmic path, sort of like the cherry on top, the thing that you seal it with is like, I'm glad I did that. I associate with that. Like I did that. And basically it's like a sealing it with like some joy or, yep, that's me. And I did it. And I'm glad. That feeling actually completes a karma, and it has an incredible amount of power. And so I thought today to really talk about and maybe do a meditation or two where we focus on, and I think it's so weird. Like as Buddhists, we're trying to conquer our egos. But even that can be a trip. That can be a whole ego trip of like, I've got no, come on. Like what is ego in the end? It's like this little identity that I have, right? We're not talking about having this huge inflated ego, just kind of like, here's who I am. Here's all the negative stuff I did. And if I'm owning that, then not only is there nothing wrong with owning the good things I do and rejoicing, but it's a healthy thing. And from a Buddhist perspective, from a karmic perspective, it's a really important practice. But I think, we all want to be humble. And all of that is good. We understand that building a big ego and, all of that trappings are not a good path for us. I think if we're in a class like this, we have already some sense like, okay, feeding that demon is pretty problematic. But there's something very different about genuinely being glad about the progress that we've made and are making on the path, the little small incremental changes in our hearts and minds. I'm not perfect. We talked last the last class, and I remember saying, God, I really wish that karma like was the fire under my butt. Like if I was aware 24/7 of karma, I wish that I really had true renunciation and a desire to get out of samsara. I don't have these things. But have I changed over the course of years of practicing? Absolutely, yes. Do I have more patience? Yes. Is my behavior more aligned with what I think my lamas would want to see? And am I working on myself in those areas where it's not aligned? And yes to all of those things. And so I think we just don't spend enough time being happy for those things and acknowledging those things and kind of sealing them with a joy and a rejoicing and rededicating them. This is the thing. You can go back over your life and you can look at the progress that you've made, and the small kind of, you can either do a like a what do you call it, revisionist history, where you're going back and thinking about even before you were ever a Buddhist, before you ever took refuge, all the kindnesses that you've done over the course of your life, the moments when you've put your own self-interest aside and really tried to serve another being. And you can remember all those things and you can be glad. Like that's some kind of karma that was ripening as a habit or an inclination. And when we focus our mind on those things, we're putting mental energy into them and we are fertilizing them. And then we can dedicate them. Something I did 5 years ago, I can dedicate thinking about it today, feeling happy. I can dedicate that towards enlightenment, towards my own enlightenment and the enlightenment of all living beings. So I thought, to talk about that and remind you all of that. And, maybe if there's any kind of like homework, I think um, we probably all do purification practice. Um, but I'm guessing probably most of us are not doing this. Or if we are, it's once in a while when maybe somebody reminds us, or, in those occasions where we're in a formal class and we're dedicating and, rejoice, somebody calls it out and we feel happy, like, oh, I'm here, I'm doing this practice, I'm really filled with joy, and then I dedicate it. But how often are we at the end of our, truly at the end of our day, like, purify, before you go to bed, do a quick 4 powers, on the day, like try to recall where you weren't showing up in your life the way you aspire to. And, without shame or, well, we talked about the Buddhist definition of shame. So shame's okay if it's that, right? But without any heavy trips on yourself. Just like, okay, these things are not going to ripen in a way that I want. And I want to purify those things and do the 4 powers. But then maybe end your day with thinking about, what did I do today? And I know you've heard, because definitely in this tradition, it's often talked about, let's rejoice in all the things that, the centers are doing, all the goodness that the Dalai Lama is doing, all the projects, all those other things to rejoice in. So it's like we can rejoice not only in what we've done, but rejoicing in what we're seeing others do, or our fellow students, the efforts that they're making. And there's some percentage of the karma that you actually get. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to put like specific numbers on things. I don't know, it always sounded like an estimate, but I think he probably I don't know, I have faith he probably knew something I don't know. But just by being glad about what other people do, we are associating our mind stream with that. We're saying, I like that, that's the kind of thing that I value. And we're making an investment in that we can also put in our enlightenment account. So yeah, I guess I want to kind of open it up there. I don't know, hopefully you've heard something like this before. Is this something that, I don't know, does it make sense to you? uh
I have never heard about I've heard about going back and writing past indiscretions, but never, I know I did a lot more before I met the Dharma um than I do now. It just seems like, my practice takes up quite a bit. So I don't um yeah, so I don't have the time to help and to be the bodhisattva that I know I was before I found the Dharma. Um, and
that's so
so this is kind of an aha moment, like, oh, hey, yeah, I
yeah.
kind of think for things I've never heard of.
Well, it came up last week, and I'm trying to think of the context, but or maybe it was a couple weeks ago. Sometimes when we're on the path, we almost feel like we're not doing as much, or we're not as good, like in some way, like, oh, but I think some of it is that we are focused on different kinds of merit, maybe. But I look at myself, and if I'm honest, I've some of the not feeling like I'm as good is because I'm more aware. I'm more aware of what I'm doing. I'm more aware of what my motivations are. So I have a habit, which is, mixed bag, good and bad, of looking back at things and really kind of unraveling, like, what were my motivations? Sometimes acts of generosity were really like exchanges where there was something expected, right? Things like, I used to not have boundaries like I have now. So it looked like I was great because I did a lot of great, nice things for people, but a lot of it was, maybe I just wanted a gold star. It wasn't always like, oh, tit for tat, but just like credit or to be seen as a good person. But even so, everything we do in this realm is a mixed bag. We have ignorance. So things I did that were nice and good and, all the lots of activities, they also had goodness. And the good, how do I know? Because I obviously had a habit of doing, they were polluted with ignorance, like everything, like everything I'm doing now too. But there was a seed, a habit of goodness that must have come from somewhere. And so just rejoicing in that, looking back and saying, all these things that I did, they are a sign of something. The fact that I wanted to do those things, the fact that I did do those things, they didn't come from nowhere. They also came from karma. They came from past goodness. They were goodness, and they came from past goodness. And just rededicating those things and feeling happy and rejoicing in them and saying, at the time, I wasn't thinking about enlightenment. I didn't even know this, but now I do. And like, wow, I've created some powerful seeds, and it's never too late to like get our seeds, do the reaping, and then reinvest that. And maybe that's not the good. I'm not like a farmer or a good gardener, so but I think that that's an okay analogy for today's purposes. But so I'm glad if I've offered something new or just kind of reinforcing that. I seriously, and if I say it to you, this is one of the benefits of teaching a course is that then if you don't do it, you feel like a real hypocrite. So, I also need to be rejoicing in the things that I'm doing. So I would really encourage and invite you all, and I'll take it as an assignment for myself, because I forget. I start doing other things and then the very basic things I stop doing or don't pay attention to. But before you go to bed, whatever your regrets are, great. Take care of that. But then spend some time reflecting and in your own way and feeling happy and dedicating the virtue of all the things that you've done. And then when you've exhausted that, start thinking about all the things that you've seen done by others, and it can be like Buddhist things, it can be, the deeds of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or your personal teacher, or gosh, all the classes that Thupten Norbaling is offering, which is so, really amazing. um, I've been a part of this organization for a very long time, and just looking at what's offered, it's just it's mind blowing, that people can just kind of from wherever they are, there's just so much that's being offered, and just rejoicing in that, and then all the people who actually attend, and are practicing and trying to um, develop realizations in their own minds. So spending that time and just kind of going out, like really fantasizing about all the goodness and feeling happy about it, and like to the core of your being, and then dedicating that towards enlightenment. And I challenge you, I ask you to try that and see if it makes a qualitative difference in your life, even today, right? Because um, regret purifies the result similar to the cause. So rejoicing must then be the fertilizer that will ripen as a result similar to the cause. So, and if we remember emptiness while that's the other thing, remembering emptiness while we do all this, uh, to the best of our ability, because, I'm assuming we're not Aryas. I know I'm not. So it's a challenge for us, but bringing to mind emptiness and rejoicing in the goodness. And because of those things, because of karma and emptiness, then my practice can have those results. And maybe, hopefully, we would start to see a shift in our world. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to invite some dialogue. It can be about this or something else. And then if we don't have a lot of conversation, then we can do some meditations that are kind of rejoicing. I want to go out on a positive note. And that will like flow right into our dedication. So I think that works. But it can be about anything. It can be about this topic that, talking about rejoicing or anything at all. I hope someone will please let's have another great conversation. Any takers? Yes, Jay, thank you.
Yeah, one of my problems is I talk too much in my own assessment. So I
I'm
do want
grateful.
okay, okay. Look, connected to rejoicing for me, and what makes sense is like Ton Lin. So taking in the bad. I'm very basic on this, very basic. It's taking in the bad and blowing out the good, so to speak, right? Breathing in
Yeah.
the bad. Yeah, okay. So that's what
I
comes
would
up.
add, just add one thing to that. You take in the bad and then you destroy it.
What, say what?
You
What was the
take
word?
in the negative, but then you destroy it.
Ah, it's the way it's been taught to me is that um you take it in and transform it in your heart and then send it out as the good. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Again, this is
when we say transform, it's like we've destroyed it, right? Like it's
yeah,
our own
yeah,
bodhicitta or whatever, that's that
yeah.
alchemy. Yes. Sorry.
And I do know I do have to have an awareness of, you can also be like when you're breathing in all of the suffering, that can get really heavy and intense. And that you have to be, I guess, in a certain sense, more aware of not letting it stick to you. Yeah. I was a social worker for 45 years, so I had plenty of practice,
That's why
right?
I made the point. So Jay, uh yeah, do you want to catch me up? I don't know where you guys lost me, and so I apologize.
Okay, so we had been talking about variations of breathing in the suffering and then transforming, destroying, and then breathing out. The nurturing is how I would see it,
Mhm.
and the healing, hopefully. So, yeah, I guess I find that very effective. I think also for me, it's like I'm very big, and this would have a lot to do with how I use my training, positive reframe. Do you know that expression? Taking in a situation, and then yeah, it's connected to emptiness ultimately, because you
Yeah.
see whatever is happening and recognize that it's not necessarily negative, and that you look at it from a different perspective, and you can see a way it's a way forward, if anything else. So those are some of my thoughts about that.
Yeah, I love that. It's even looking back on, negative things that may be seemingly negative things that perhaps have happened in our lives, like, oh, it's like a spiritual revisionism. Like, oh,
Yeah,
well, that thing, here's the benefit that, and the great thing is, it's never too late to extract a benefit from
yeah,
something that negative that happened.
yeah,
And I think that can also provide us with sort of fodder for our rejoicing efforts,
yeah,
right? Like looking back and like, oh, that thing that, I felt so lost when this thing happened, but it triggered me to take XYZ actions that now have led me to this place.
yeah,
Um, that
yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And connected to that is also seeing things that have happened, because I have a tendency that spontaneously in my mind, the past will crop up where I was upset with somebody. Somebody did something to me and I'm angry at them. And now it gives me an opportunity, one, to try, and I will emphasize try, to send them positive thoughts and also empathy that their suffering led them to behave in a manner that was not in my interest and ultimately not in theirs either.
Yeah. I think, and it depends on what you're talking about. Sometimes um, recalling something negative, if it's still charged for us,
Yeah.
it can be a great opportunity to do four powers. Like, oh, why am I still having these emotions around this? What is there for me to be looking at? If
Yep.
I
Yeah.
if I experience something unpleasant, then I there's something there for me to explore and to work on.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
I
also the unfortunate thing of thinking, well, if there's something unpleasant and they're doing something unpleasant toward me, oh golly gosh, what did I do to them in the past that I don't recall?
yeah, them or countless other sentient beings. So it's nice sometimes when the mystery is resolved and we know. It can be a
Yeah.
challenge when we don't. When we talk about like remedial actions, I often think about, the first time I heard some of these teachings, and the thought was immediately and strangely to the people who I really could not connect the dots, obviously. But like, okay, I'm going to own it and I'm going to, I see that I must have created something and I'm going to own this. And then, so I'm going to extend an olive branch. And it's so interesting. Sometimes it's better not to extend the olive branch right away because what if they don't accept it? Then like, whew, now the ego, like this enemy of mine that I've tamped down and I'm like, bad, bad, Bonnie, don't do this. If I go and I, extend the olive branch to someone and then they cop an attitude, guess what raises its ugly head again? So it's just part of like just being smart and kind of understanding my own psychology and where I am. Sometimes that apology, even when I can connect it, and certainly when I cannot, that's when it's harder. If I see what I've done, then it's easier to do that. And then I guess, if they're not gracious in accepting my apology, I can deal with that better. But if it feels like, I'm really extending this olive branch and then they don't accept it, for example, that I would have a hard time with. So maybe it's better than to wish them well from a distance. And the other cool thing about that, and we all have to know, like, let's put our money where our mouth is. Like sometimes we need to be stretching ourselves and like put ourselves out there. Other times we need to be smart about our own limitations and where am I spiritually? Can I actually do this? And just, you know, Master Shantideva says carrots and potatoes, like the simple little things, starting with that, and then sometimes stretching and doing something that's a little bit harder. But, the benefit sometimes of, some of the Buddhist practices, as opposed to going out and, doing something in the world, is especially if we have strong egos, or if that's an area like maybe we've done too much in the past, and maybe we do feel like, oh, I wanted credit, or I wanted payback, or I wanted, admiration, which is kind of like credit, I guess. Then maybe sometimes doing less and doing a practice that is more secret, like a Tonglen or some Buddhist practice. The nice thing is, we can't build up much of an ego around it, unless, of course, we're telling everyone that that we're doing, we're doing these great high holy practices. I remember once I went on this, I just think of stupid things that to share. I don't know if it's apropos, but I once went on this camping trip and it was right after meeting the Dharma. Of course, that's when you're like most energetic. At least I was like so energetic. And, I went on this camping trip and everyone else on the camping trip was like eaten alive by mosquitoes. And not a single mosquito bit me. And I thought, so this is the problem, I thought, it's because I'm not killing now. I'm holy, so I don't get bit by mosquitoes anymore. And then I decided to share my experience, because it was too good to keep secret. So, and I swear, sometimes what happens is like it just hits you. It's so in your face. So I was literally at a teaching. I was at Vajrapani. It was during the break, and I was so rejoicing, but also bragging that I had gone on this trip and like already I'm seeing these great results and I wasn't bitten by a mosquito. And I swear it wasn't 10 seconds. And I had this huge welt on my arm. And I proceeded to they had the windows open, and I don't think anyone else was bitten by mosquitoes that night. But I walked out of there with welts, like big giant mosquito welts all over me, And and I consider that a blessing. It's like, okay, don't think you're more than you are. But had I just kept the nice little secret thing, the nice little secret things are good, right? They're just like, hey, sometimes I have results and they might not be huge, but I have some results that I feel like I can see. But to your point, Jay, I don't really know what that karma was, where it came from, but that's a little spiritual revisionism, right? When things go right in our lives, it's okay. Like attribute it to your practice, and keep going, you know. Don't get too discouraged when you see negative things, and don't build up an ego when you have positive experiences. But keep them as your own little secrets, and maybe you won't be eaten alive by mosquitoes.
And the nice thing about not extending an olive branch for me is I can't make any mistakes if I'm doing this reparation quietly rather than trying to do it in person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes then you might come to a point where then it's like, okay, then it's appropriate. But it's sort of like when you know what your capacity is.
Yeah.
And I feel like so much of our spiritual practice is about learning that about ourselves. Like, what are what are the boundaries that I need to sort of protect because of my own karmic makeup, my own propensities? And then where should I be stretching a little? And only I know that. And frankly, I only know that, and I don't totally know it, but I know it better because I'm exploring and I'm testing that and, always trying to do a little bit more, right? Our capacity should be expanding, but the idea is not to, not like take a rubber band and just like break it, right? From too much. It's just gradually increasing.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's not glamorous, but I think that's what we can do.
Thank you.
And any other thoughts or comments or sharing that anybody wants to? Okay. Yes, Nim and Aphasia. Did I
Yeah,
say
good.
that correctly this week?
Yeah, you did. Yep.
Thank God. Thank the Buddha. Thank.
God. I was gonna say that I used to think initially that, virtuous actions had to be this grandiose, big things that are noteworthy, even if I'm not sharing it with other people, but they can see it. And in my mind, I'm like, yes, I've done this thing, and there's this change as a result of what I've done. And I think over time, I realized that it doesn't have to be that. It can be little things like just saying thank you to somebody in the Starbucks line, or that coffee that tea was like really good that you made, or thanks for the extra ice that I asked for, or just, pulling up to a light and seeing somebody trying to get across the street, and obviously knowing that nobody's going to run into me behind, but slowing down so that person can go because I know traffic's going to come. So just being mindful of ways in which I help people, just little things, little acts of kindness that really change the day for somebody or makes a difference in their life, from my perspective, obviously, because sometimes I don't even think they care. But from my perspective, it was a good deed. And it was a virtuous action, and my motivation was purely just to help because there was nothing to be gained from doing it. And so I think I do a lot more of that right now than I do big, grandiose things where I'll
Yeah.
get recognition or where it's noteworthy. It's just stuff that, yep, that made me feel good because I helped somebody, and then I'm good with that.
Well,
And
it's so. Go ahead.
that, I know I was going to say, and then rejoicing in the fact that I think I've helped, and hopefully people see it as me helping.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And it actually brings up something that I didn't talk about, but I think is also really important. So, like regret is a weed killer, regret can kill positive seeds. So, if you remember the full karmic action, you at the end, you're like, yeah, that's me, I'm glad. And we can go back retroactively and do that, which is nice. if we didn't do it in the past. But doing a good deed and then regretting it, it's almost like you get the worst of all worlds. So because you did the thing and then I mean, it comes to mind, pissed all over it, you know? Sorry, that's what just comes to my mind. We did a good deed and then we basically, in some very strong way, undo it by regretting it. I have a friend who there was a student who offered to their teacher, like their house. Oh, it's always usually new students who like do the big grandiose things. Um, and then the Lama's like, no, no, no. If you want to give it, if you still want to give me your house in like 5 years or whatever, I'll take it. But no, no, thank you. And 5 years later, that student wasn't even around. So what would have happened? That person would have done and what happens when we go beyond our really beyond our capacity is we have an opportunity to actually incur some negativities. So it starts out as something good. I want to do something. I want to, for whoever. It can be in a Dharma context, doing something for my Lama or the center, or it can be in a non-Dharma context. It really doesn't matter, although heavier when it comes to a Dharma context. But then, what happens, so say you make like a huge donation that you can't afford to make. You're in a moment of, and we have these moments, right? We have these moments of real inspiration. And sometimes there are things that we should act on, but we have to be smart about our merit. We have to do the things that we can do and be happy about. And I think this is good, just a good rule, just conventionally speaking, from a regular psychological perspective. Don't do things that you're gonna regret. Because then in the end you have like resentment. So what happens if you cross a boundary, and then sometimes we even go into like blame, like, oh, I felt like I had to make donations to the center because I've been learning they were teaching me about generosity, and then we could put our own story on it, and then develop really negative thoughts about this is why lamas don't like to teach on guru devotion because it's loaded because people have a hard time with it, and it's because we are not taking that responsibility. But I think we do have to be taught that, because our hearts, sometimes we get really inspired. We do have to be taught to like have boundaries and to stretch them in really smart ways, like get to know ourselves before we do grand gestures. And the other thing is with the grand gestures, there again, I think I said it already, there's that ego payoff. So, better to stay on the safe side of things, be the one who licks the envelopes. I have a good friend who would always volunteer to clean the bathrooms at the Dharma Center. Like, no ego happening there, She's not out doing anything, making the offerings. There's certain jobs that everybody wants to do. You want to be the one making the mandala offering, and you want to be the one, and she would clean the toilets. And I'm like, that's smart, it's safe. Uh, so yeah, to your point, like those small things, they're safe for us. And then they do grow. So having that confidence and then just remembering that we don't want to do a good deed and just waste it by regretting that we did it because we didn't know our own boundaries, Um, just another, just as a fellow practitioner, like just another hint that that's important thing for us to look out for. Don't do, there's always a need, and we always want to say yes, I think. I think that's partly what happens is we want to say yes. So it's not drawing a boundary and saying no. It's not just saying no. It's saying no, but inside, like, oh, I want to be the kind of person who could say yes. Like reserving that, like I aspire to that. And that's how we live with that. That's how we live honestly and make spiritual progress because we're really knowing where we are and then trying to stretch that. And when what we aspire to be and where we are, when that differential is really uncomfortable, and so there's two things we can do with that discomfort, we can cover it up and we can just pretend like it's not there, or we can sit with that discomfort and allow it truly to inspire us to change and grow. I said earlier, if I say to you, do this, this is good to do this, do rejoicing. If I don't do it, I feel like a hypocrite. Now, maybe for some people, no problem. But if we're really practicing, like that's a horrible feeling. So it just inspires me a little bit more to do the things that I know are the right things to do. Um, and that's another way that we can like help our Vajra brothers and sisters is just, being in it with them and sharing what our challenges are. And then, when we give them a piece of good advice, Dharma advice out of love, then, note to self. Why am I even having this appearance of having this conversation? It's again that pronoia, like, oh, maybe this person is a Buddha, and maybe this situation is a setup, for me to like do what I need to do, that kind of a thing. So, yeah, I think maybe I talked all around that, but just want to say I think it's really important. Um, Anybody else? So thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to comment on or one last time before we do a meditation and then dedicate and say adios for this course? Okay. I thank you again. So let's do a meditation. I've been talking about rejoicing, so I think this is what we have to do, right? So here's the assignment before we go into it, because it's an interesting thing trying to lead a meditation. It's like, am I going too fast, too slow, too generic? Like, you want to flesh it out. But let's think about something, and you can decide if you want to. Sometimes it's more meaningful to think of something that you did today, um, and it doesn't have to be big, because we know that karma grows. And we also know that if we create the causes, we must experience the result, right? These are things we learned in this class if we didn't know them already. So maybe it's better to take something small. I was going to do a whole look back on your life, but now I'm thinking, no, no, no. Act of truth, small goodness you did today. So let's take a minute again and put our minds into neutral. And now let's bring to mind something that we did today, something good, something we'd like to see more of in ourselves. And then thinking about the laws of karma, having faith that having done this action, that it will have results and that those results will grow and that they will ripen in several different ways. It'll ripen as a rebirth. It'll ripen as a circumstance similar to the cause, as a habit, and as our environment. So thinking of that good thing that we did and taking refuge in these teachings. Allow yourself to really feel happy. And maybe acknowledge that you could have shown up in a different way. You could have chosen differently not to do that action. but you did. And think of the selflessness that had to have been there, even not a huge gesture, but the wisdom or compassion that was behind your action. That must have been behind your action. Even if it's a habit, a ripening of that wisdom and compassion. Mm-hmm. And think how fortunate you are to have been able to take that action. And now imagine that action that you did being multiplied countless times. Imagine if everyone on this planet in countless worlds were to behave in this way. What if they behaved in this way all the time? How great would that be? There's no act so small that a kindness that if the world were filled with it would not be monumental. Imagine yourself always having the ability to act in this way. Imagine this small act creating a kind of habit and an ability that grows. Think about the other kinds of acts of goodness that this could lead to. As it grows exponentially. How could we not become enlightened? And just imagine your capacity growing so that there is no more need for boundaries, no more need to look out just for ourselves. Being able to be totally present and acting in perfect way, providing everyone we meet with exactly what they need. Our small kindness is a seed for that. Fertilize it with a joyful feeling. The gladness of truly being able to serve.
Now dedicate that small act to ripen in this way as our complete total enlightenment, as the eradication of every negativity in our own minds, the expansion of our heart, developing true bodhicitta, the wish to liberate every living being. And then at full enlightenment, the ability to do that. And then when you're ready, you can come back into the room, come back into the space. Did that feel good? Anybody want to share? Or did anyone struggle with that? Guys are too easy today. What's going on? Okay. Do you want to do another one? Are we up for that? Okay. So let's do some spiritual revisionism. Let's think about the big kindnesses, the big good deeds that we can recall in our own lives. Let's start with that. So we just did a meditation on something small that we did today. Maybe now try to think of the top 3 or 4 good deeds, things that you're really proud of. Like if you were to make a spiritual offering to your teacher of your practice, what would be the things that you would offer them? And replay those things in your mind. Let's take a few minutes to really think about them, really recall them. These are bigger things. And even though perhaps we did not do them perfectly, or maybe at the time we didn't fully understand what we were doing, or maybe we didn't dedicate it then. But now recalling those things and thinking about the laws of karma, the fact that the seeds that we've planted must grow, and that they will grow exponentially bigger than what we've done, gaining momentum, and that the fruit of those acts must be similar to the cause. So again, let's imagine what that looks like. What if we were able to act in these ways all the time? What if our world was filled with other beings who behaved in this way all the time? What if these good deeds we've done created a habit and increased our ability to act in this way? What other kinds of related things would we become capable of? Allow yourself to feel so grateful and happy that you were able to do these acts of goodness. Feel glad, deep rejoicing, joy at having done them, joy at the kind of seeds that you've planted, and all the ways that those seeds will surely ripen. Ripening in the kind of rebirth we take, ripening in the circumstances of our lives, being the recipient of these kinds of acts of goodness, and a world that is filled with other beings who are also acting in accordance. And imagine that through continually doing acts like this, we develop a habit to do more, and it becomes easier. And then we're able to eliminate whatever obstacles prevent us from acting this way all the time. And then by example, others see, and they want to also, they aspire also to behave in this way. And they also remove the negativities and obstacles in their own minds. And we all reach the path of enlightenment. We all develop all the realizations in our hearts and minds. Give me. This is how karma works. This is how it will work. And so feeling glad about that, have faith, and it is faith, but hopefully educated faith, that these are the things that will bring us to enlightenment. These are the things that will liberate us from samsara and will liberate every other living being. And will invest every being in happiness and bliss. And then let's dedicate all of those actions that we've just meditated on toward developing all those realizations. And then the time that we've spent today together and this entire course, every moment that we've spent together, let's dedicate it all towards that common goal, the removal of all suffering. And then bliss, the bliss of enlightenment for all living beings. So I'll dedicate Jamjub Samchok Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyam Pame Payam, Gong Me Gondu Pawasho. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. May all of our holy teachers have long and healthy lives, especially His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May all their wishes be completely fulfilled. May all of our Dharma friends also have obstacles removed for their practice. May all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. And may we plant the seeds and have confidence in the seeds we plant that it will be so. So you can come back and say goodbye, or we have a few minutes. I know dedication should be the last thing, but it just seemed like we were on a trajectory to dedicate and then maybe have a few minutes to say goodbye, or I don't know, make comments or suggestions. But by the way, my email is just my name at gmail.com. So if you ever have questions or comments or feedback, hey, liked this, didn't like this so much, totally grateful for that. And then if some people are shy and want to talk about something not in this forum, I can totally be available. I would love that. Thank you.
So can you just clarify your email? Maybe write it
Oh,
for me?
sure. It's
Thanks.
I can put it in the chat too.
Yeah, please. That's helpful. Thank you.
So it's bonniesewick@gmail.com. I
Excellent.
just
Thank
put it in the
you.
chat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Would love the feedback. Constructive feedback, welcome. Insults, welcome. Less so, but welcome. No, I really appreciate everyone's time, and it's always a joy uh, to to teach a class. And I'm acutely aware that I'm just like you guys. I'm just a person on the path, flawed and working on myself. So it's a great opportunity for me. I'm really grateful and grateful for your attention and gosh, the goodness, so I'm going to say one other nice thing about you guys that I think you should rejoice in. Um, for much of my Buddhist career, most of the teachings I've had have been with like really high holy lamas, and then like people like Rabina, like kind of heavy hitters. And I think, and I had classes that were sometimes offered and sometimes I didn't go, it was like a person like me. And I was like, true confession. Not entirely, but I think it takes a lot of, it just takes a lot to sit and, allow me, to kind of share and to participate. It's easy to give your attention to someone who's obviously a holy being, and sometimes it's a little more challenging. But hopefully, there's an upside too, which is
that I kind of can relate to the place where maybe you are. And I think I said before, it's nice to kind of have both, like the really holy beings and then the ones that are like on the journey and trying to get it together right along with you. So I'm grateful to be on the journey with you guys. Yeah, and hats off for just being here and being willing to participate in whatever way you have. I'm just grateful, and I wish everyone, I really do wish everyone like enlightenment. Um, and I feel sometimes it's a million miles away, and yet maybe just right there. That Dzogchen view, it could be right there, um, in a single lifetime, in a single moment. So. And then when it happens for you, maybe you will remember me and come back and help fish me out of samsara. Like, we now have some karma that we've made together. We have a connection, and I think it's really an important connection. So yeah, um, we got to look out for each other. So whoever's first in the big race, come back and help the rest of us for sure. All right. Um, I want to say I love you. I love you and I appreciate you all so much. And I'm sorry the class is ending. It's been lovely. Thank you.